Oh my gosh. Kathy said, "What's y'all's topic today?" I said, "We're still on uh, seed oils." And she said, "Oh, I thought maybe you guys were going to jump off into red dye number three." And I just did this. Oh, no data. No data.
Yeah, so that
The FDA,
ruling, yeah, they
they were
banned
just
it.
bullied. They were just bullied into that. That's what I
Well,
think.
it comes down to a legal requirement. So there, I think it's called the Delaney Clause. And in that Delaney Clause, it said if there's any I can't remember the exact wording, but basically if you can have a high degree of confidence that it causes cancer in either animals or humans at any dose,
At any dose.
at any dose. And so the data that they found, which fit
Oh,
under the Delaney clause, is only in Winstar rats, only that specific breed of rat,
wow.
only the males, and only at a dose 7,500 times
Oh
what
my
what we're
gosh.
consuming. So that's the basis for the ban on Red 3.
Are you serious?
Yep, yep, that's it.
Oh, I'd have felt better if they were
Oh,
just
also,
bullied.
also, it's only Winstar rats, only the males, and only through a mechanism which is not plausibly biologically active in human beings.
I'd have just felt better if they were bullied. I could accept that. Okay, yeah, they got bullied. I'd be fine with that. But come on, Winstar rats,
You know,
males,
7,500
75
times,
times, 7,500 times.
100 times
Oh,
through a mechanism which is not biologically plausible in human beings. So people are taking this as a win. Unfortunately for them, they're just going to get more Red 40.
yeah. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, I was trying to explain this. I was trying to say this. Of course, I didn't know that data you just told me, but I was like, well, I just think they got bullied. And I think Zach was said something like, oh, he said something smart aleck about red dyes, and I said, there's no data. There's no data. Just oh
I forgot to show you this because we
yeah,
talked about it last time, right?
yeah. Go ahead.
All I want for Christmas is a precisely defined
Find
research
a research
question.
question.
So there you have it in
That
the
is so
BMC.
good. Oh, wait. Holy cow. Go on down there a little bit. Oh, that's hilarious. Oh my gosh. You need to send that to me. Did you send that to me?
No, I
I don't
didn't.
think you did.
I just
Oh,
remembered this morning and I was like, oh, I forgot this, but I figured I'd show you when we jumped on here. I'll send it to you.
oh, that's
That was
hilarious,
like
man. I started reading it. Okay,
yeah.
workshop, different measures of performance.
Yeah, when you told me, so I think it was Kathy, maybe she asked if we should do something on food allergies. And
Yes.
immediately in my head was food allergies what? I don't know what that means. I don't know what it is that you want me to talk about.
We
Food
need to do it.
allergies, they exist.
We need to do a study on swimming.
Yeah,
Or winter sports. Let's do winter
winter sports.
sports. Oh, so good.
All right.
I'm ready.
Let's look at this, man.
In it.
Corn oil in treatment of ischemic heart disease by
Hmm.
Rose and colleagues. Now, this is affectionately referred to as the Rose corn oil trial. Um, and we saw this, I'm going to refer back to that meta-analysis. We saw this in our reanalyses from Christopher Ramsden. They had the rose corn oil trial in there. So we're going to take a look at that as well. But we're going to go through this thing really quickly because this is also characterized as being a linoleic acid specific intervention. This um, shows that there's harm from these seed oils and stuff. So let's go through and see what this thing says. So there's recognition in the introduction here that there's correlation between high levels of serum cholesterol and high intake of animal fats and low serum cholesterol with vegetable oils. And they go on to say that there hasn't really been a study. So this was 1965.
Mm-hmm.
Hadn't been a study quite to date, like or a control trial, right? An intervention trial where we actually give people vegetable oils and see what happens to their serum cholesterol. There just has been these correlations found, epidemiology. So the aim of the trial here was to study the effects of prescribing a vegetable oil and a restricted fat diet to patients with ischemic heart disease. So just like our Sydney Diet Heart Study, just like the Minnesota Coronary Experiment, what we have is secondary prevention we're looking
Mm-hmm.
at here. People already have heart
Mm-hmm.
disease. Okay. So in this trial, we're really looking at myocardial infarctions. Almost all of the patients had myocardial infarctions. Now, I'm unclear on whether this was in hospital setting or free living. It doesn't really say, but we do know that these people were recruited through hospital. Now, whether they were inpatients there. I don't know. Don't know that, right? So, but they say it seems likely that if any differences would emerge between olive oil and corn oil groups, these would reflect the specific effects of polyunsaturated fatty acids. So, kind of a cool thing here. So, they wanted to separate the effects of polyunsaturated fatty acids. So, we have monounsaturated fatty acids and polyunsaturated fatty acids. And then we have different types of polyunsaturated fatty acids. So we not only had a corn oil arm in this trial, we also had an olive oil arm in this trial.
Mm.
And then we had a control group. Okay, so they wanted to look and see, are these effects that we're seeing just due to quote unquote unsaturated fats, or are there specific fats that have more effect than others? Which is, I mean, kind of thoughtful here. So, inclusion criteria, patients had to have electrocardiographic evidence of infarction, so heart attacks, clear history of angina or effort, so no pectoral angina like we had in Sydney Diet Heart Study. They were under 70 years of age, and an absence of heart failure and also any non-cardiac disease likely to threaten life within 2 years. Absence of personal or geographic factors likely to interfere with clinic attendance of or taking of the oil. So they want to make sure people lived close enough to attend the clinic, come in, have their blood drawn, blah, 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 and also be able to pick up the oil as they're going to give it out. So one of the first things that I see that may have an influence on the outcomes here. So all patients received conventional treatments at the discretion of the physicians. So even though we have people come in and we randomize them to groups, right? And the point of randomization is to try and randomly, evenly disperse any, confounding factors that may have an effect on our outcome. What is not randomized is the discretion of the physician.
Mm.
Does that make sense?
Yep. Yep.
So we may have physicians giving certain treatments more in one group than another, even though the patients themselves have been randomized, right? So you could have 5 patients seeing the same doctor, and 3 of those patients randomized to one group, one is randomized to another group, and then one is randomized to another group. Well, you have 3 of them in this one group. So you may see a larger effect in that group from this conventional treatment. You with me on that?
Yeah, I am. I'm just in my head. I'm also going through what kind of medications were doctors giving in 1965. I don't know if they were really using statins in those days or.
Yeah, I'm not really sure. They talk about some anticoagulant therapy, and so
Yep.
if
Yep.
people were on the anticoagulant therapy at the trial start, they were excluded. However, later on, some of the patients were started on anticoagulant therapy. So there is some effect of medication and of conventional post infarction treatments that could be swaying effects in our outcomes here. So we have these two oil groups, and in both of the groups, they are given some dietary advice, right? Avoid foods fried in right fried foods, whether it be from oil or lard. They're probably using a lot of lard back in that time. Fatty meat, sausage, pastry, all that stuff, blah blah blah. And then they're given an oil supplement of 80 grams a day,
That's a lot.
taken in 3 doses at meal
Oh,
times. Yeah. So, uh, to put that into perspective, a tablespoon of oil is 14 grams, I think. So we're looking at almost a third of a cup of oil a day.
oh.
That's
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 like
a
your
lot of
grandma.
oil.
That's your grandma. Drink this castor oil. It's good for you.
Hmm.
No.
Yeah. So,
Mm.
um, so the amount of oil prescribed here really doesn't fit into the epidemiological evidence that we have at the time. People, when we look at countries during this time period where people were consuming a lot of polyunsaturated fats and having low rates of heart disease, they weren't consuming that much oil. The amounts of oil, and we're going to talk about how much fat was in the diet here, but so total, this trial was planned to cover 3 years of observation for each patient, but by the end of 2 years, only half of the patients remained in the trial. So the data that we have is just for the first 2 years. This is important to note because as the trial progressed from baseline to 2 years, we have people dropping out periodically throughout those 2 years. Now, when people drop out of the trial, we haven't gotten to how many people were in the trial. Um, you start to lose that randomization that you had
Hmm.
initially. So
Hmm.
that randomized distribution of biological effects or whatever may be happening, what that once was randomized, as people start dropping out, you start to lose that random distribution. And that's important. We also have at baseline here history of infarction. So having one infarction only. So in our control group and our olive oil group, the percent of patients in those groups with one infarction was 65%, and the percent of patients in the corn oil group was 71.4. So we're already starting out in the corn oil group with a
Pretty
higher
skewed.
percentage of people
Mm.
who had one infarction. And now we know that having one infarction makes you predisposed to having a second infarction. You have a higher risk of having a second heart attack once you have the first one. And if we have a higher percentage of people in the corn oil group who have had one, we have a higher risk of having a second infection in that corn oil group than the other two already.
Particularly in 1965 to set in
Uh-huh.
1974 or five, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. So let's get into how many people were in the trial. 80 patients started the trial.
Oh, that's it? Oh my
That's
gosh.
it. 80 people.
Wow.
So not a large sample size. Um, also, you know, the whole secondary prevention thing as they're trying to test this effect out, this just does not seem to be the population to test this hypothesis. All right.
Yeah.
And already going about this 80 grams of oil a day, the Sydney Diet Heart Study, the amount of oil, again, much higher than we see in population levels. So really not very well designed interventions to test these effects. All right. So they're prescribed 80 grams of oil a day, right? Unsurprising to you and I, they had many people found the treatment burdensome. They had distaste, nausea, and diarrhea were the most common complaints.
That oil will do it for you.
That oil will do it for you. So there's an attempt made to assess how much oil each patient actually took based on the number of cans issued, the amounts left in the return cans, and the patient's own statements. And they put these results down in this little table here. But these are, of course, maximum estimates. So just like our other two trials that we looked at, number one, our control trial really wasn't controlled. They were basically free to eat whatever they want. They didn't receive any dietary advice. So we have no data on what they were eating. We also have no idea on how much oil the two oil groups were eating. We have an educated guess, but we really don't know. Right? And patients in all three groups tended to lose a little weight as time went on. Unexpectedly, the average weight loss was greatest in the corn oil group. So corn oil, probably pretty good for weight loss. All right. And so you have here the estimated amounts of oil consumed. And we can see that as time goes on, so 0 to 6 months between these two groups, all the way to 18 to 24 months, we can see that the estimated amount decreased over time.
Wow.
So prescribed 80 grams, we really didn't achieve it. Got close in the beginning. After that, it just started to fall off the edge. Now, in the beginning, they said we wanted to test the intervention of a vegetable oil and a reduced fat diet. And a lot of people will use these trials for the suggestion that the recommendations for a low-fat diet, right? These things refute that. So I just want to take a look here. So in our corn oil group, our fat grams for the day was 50. Fat has 9 calories per gram. So 9 times 50 is 450. And on top of that, they also had another 600 calories in corn oil. So 600 plus 450 is 1050. And out of a total of 2,070 calories, half of their diet was in fat. Could that have any effect on the outcomes, Dwayne?
Oh my God. Yes, of course.
All right. Yeah. Okay, so
Jeez.
getting into the results here. So as we know, people started dropping out as this trial went through. And so as they measured progress, what they did is they looked at a few things, categorized them into things: sudden death, fatal infarction. So of course, so somebody had a heart attack that caused them to die. Definite infarction. So we definitely know they had a heart attack. And then probable infarction, non-fatal, probable infarction. So the definite infarction was non-fatal. The probable infarctions are non-fatal as well. And then they give their definition as to what a probable infarction is. And by that definition, they probably had an infarction. All right. So we can see that we have these major cardiac events here. We have the number of people that happen to, and then we have the total as people start dropping out. So as we look across this, so from 0 to 6 months, 6 to 12 months, we see that across these three groups, control, olive, corn, we can see relatively the same amount of participants in each group are dropping out. At 6 to 12 months, we have 0 in the control, 1 in the olive, 1 in the corn. Relatively the same. It only comes here between 12 and 18 months that we had this increase in probable non-fatal infarctions in the corn oil group. But
it's only one, isn't it? Oh, no, how many is that?
Well, they have the they had 4. Let me see if I can zoom in.
Well, that's okay. Yeah, 4 and 7. 4 for a total of 7 for corn.
Right. So we had 4 probable infarctions, 2 definite non-fatal infarctions, 1 sudden death. We don't know what that was due to, and 0 fatal infarctions, for a total of 7 people removed from the corn oil group at this 12 to 18 month time frame. So it only happened, the only difference, the only major difference between these three groups for the 2 year, or for 12 to 18 months on this trial, was at the between 12 and 18 months and for probable non-fatal infarctions. That's really the only major difference. Now, we talked about we had a small sample size. We had a higher percentage of the corn oil group who started out with a single infarction at baseline, which means that the corn oil group was already predisposed to have a higher risk of having a second infarction. And we also have more participants dropping out due to non-coronary diseases throughout the trial, which leaves our randomized distribution no longer randomized, which puts our corn oil trial already for this 12 to 18 month period at a higher risk of having a second possible infarction. So the diet itself, even though they found that it almost reached statistical significance, we're going to look at that in the meta-analysis, that still does not explain the alternative hypothesis here that just due to poor randomization and the corn oil group already having a higher percentage of people at risk for second infarction wouldn't explain those results. We could explain those results just on those basis. Diet, we could eliminate diet out of it already. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Wow. All right. And then lastly, in their conclusion here, the aim of the trial was not to duplicate the many carefully regulated laboratory studies of the effects of unsaturated oils on serum cholesterol. Rather, it was aimed to study the feasibility and possible value of such regimes in a typical group of hospital coronary patients. Among such persons, and especially where treatment is prolonged, it is inevitable that some will comply incompletely or not at all. So they are acknowledging that they have participants who just didn't comply. Right. So there are a lot of unknowns in this trial. There are a lot of issues going on in this trial to where I don't think that we can have a high degree of confidence to say, well, the corn oil actually is the thing that happened, right? So even though at the end of 2 years, the percentage of the control group that was remaining that was free of an additional infarction or whatever, 75%, the olive oil group was 57%, and the corn oil group was 52%. And again, this disparity between the oil groups and the control group could be explained by just how much fat the oil groups were consuming. It was almost half their diet for both of those groups.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then, so lastly, let's go back to our Ramsden analysis. And in our meta-analysis from Christopher Ramsden, we look at the Rose corn oil trial right here. So our confidence interval stretches from 0.58 to 37.15.
Yeah.
There's just nothing really that can be taken from this trial. Why this is even entertained as some kind of evidence for seed oils being bad for your health is beyond me.
It's so out of the study was just out of control. It's just out of control.
Yes.
So I mean, you're starting off with people who are sick anyway, and there's going to be if you have one MI, especially in the 60s through 70s, like we talked about, there's a high incidence of reoccurrence.
Mm-hmm.
And then, holy cow, did you see? So they were averaging 500 and something calories of oil.
Almost 600 calories of oil per day. On top of the other fat that was in their diet. Yeah, so it's 1,000 calories.
So the fat content was massive. And you know what? No wonder people was dropping out of that. And they were all men. I mean, am I correct?
Yep.
They were all men. You're not going to get a bunch of sick dudes who just almost died from a heart attack. They're not going to sit there and suck down oil for more than a day or two. It's like, yeah, this wasn't such a great idea. And if they stay in the trial, maybe they were offered money. I don't know. If you stayed in the trial, you're just going to dump that stuff because I'm not drinking that. I mean, you just think about it. Just think about the normality. Nobody's drinking that stuff.
No.
Then once you get diarrhea from that for a couple of days, I'm out. But I want that money, so I'm going to keep doing it. and then it said hospital. Okay, what was that last line about
Hospital patients.
hospital patients? Well, you don't really have control of them. You don't have, so
Yeah.
there's your control group is, again, not really controlled. Doing a study like this, nobody said it'd be easy. It's difficult.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah,
so
very
when you
difficult.
just shooting blanks out there and these guys go home and you don't know what they're eating or drinking and, good lands. I mean, people lie on their diets now.
Yeah.
It's just that's just happens. And then you got dudes dying off. Wow. Who wants to
Mm-hmm.
be a part of that study? Hey, if I croak, hey, I'm giving data to the study. Uh, did any of them smoke? Did they drink alcohol?
Yeah, that was in there, but again, through the randomization, at baseline, that would have,
Yeah.
provided some random distribution. But again, as patients drop out, some of them are lost to follow-up, some of them died for other reasons. That random distribution starts to go away and is going to play an effect on the outcomes that we see. So Rose corn oil trial, I think, is probably just one of the worst trials to try and get some kind of evaluation from. There just really isn't anything to be gained from it.
Yeah.
So, all right, that's that for rose corn oil. If you see somebody touting that sucker, they are off their rocker. So,
yes, sir.
Hope you guys got something. We'll see you next time. Coach Lambie and Dwayne out.